ladies and gentlemen, have you ever walked into a room and felt something shift in your spirit, either heavy and oppressive or light and peaceful? What if I told you that your spiritual atmosphere isn't random, and even more, that you have the authority to change it? There is one prayer, not lengthy, not complicated, but so powerful. It can alter the very climate of your soul. And today I want you to stay with me, because by the end of this message you won't just know what that prayer is, but you'll understand why it works and how to release it into your life. One prayer, one moment, eternal shift. Every environment carries a spiritual tone. It can be thick with fear, tension, pride, or full of peace, love, and expectancy. What most don't realize is we often carry that atmosphere within us. And here's the truth: what is not healed or surrendered in the spirit becomes the air we breathe and the energy we release. That's it. Simple but seismic. This isn't just a prayer of submission. It's a declaration of divine trust. It removes resistance, invites heaven to invade earth, and aligns our atmosphere with God's order. When you speak this prayer from your deepest place, everything begins to align. Clarity comes. Peace settles. Darkness lifts, and suddenly, where there was confusion, there is direction. Where there was fear, there is boldness. When you pray, not my will, but yours be done, you're not giving up. You're stepping up. You are choosing divine alignment over human striving. And that shift is what causes spiritual gravity to change. You'll notice discouragement breaks off, creativity and purpose awaken, relationships begin to heal. Miracles don't just happen to you, they begin to happen through you. Yes, opposition may rise, but don't mistake resistance for absence. The enemy always fights hardest where the shift is strongest, but this prayer, this alignment, arms you with unshakable authority. Heaven backs the heart that is fully surrendered. We often think that changing our spiritual life requires doing more time in prayer, more reading, more striving. And while spiritual discipline is important, there's something powerful about the idea that just one prayer, uttered with sincerity and full surrender, can shake the very foundations of your life. It's not the length of the prayer, nor the eloquence, that holds the power. It's the heart behind it, and the divine connection it activates. One prayer, spoken in faith, has the ability to open the floodgates of heaven and shift everything. Think about that. One moment, one sentence, can carry the weight of your entire spirit into alignment with God's will. When you realize that you don't need fancy words or hours of perfect devotion to reach the heart of God, a new kind of freedom unlocks. The kind of freedom that says, God is near and He hears me now. Not after I've fasted for 40 days, not after I've fixed myself, not after I've performed. Right now, in this moment, one prayer can change my atmosphere. There is a divine simplicity in real faith. It cuts through noise, pretense, and pressure. And the kind of prayer that changes atmospheres is born from that simplicity. Utter dependence, raw honesty, and an open spirit. The kind of prayer that rises not just from the lips, but from the depths, from the groaning place, the longing place, the surrendered place. That's the place where spiritual climate begins to shift. You see, your spiritual atmosphere is not a static thing. It's alive, it moves, it responds, it reflects the state of your inner world. And whether you realize it or not, you're always either contributing to the atmosphere of heaven or echoing the noise of the earth. When your spirit is clouded with fear, control, or striving, the atmosphere around you thickens with tension. But when your spirit is in surrender, when you pray that one pure, yielded prayer, the fog lifts. The atmosphere clears. You can feel it. It's like stepping into a room where the air is fresh after a storm. Something lifts and peace enters. And here's what's so radical. You don't have to feel powerful for that prayer to be powerful. You don't have to be on a spiritual mountaintop. Sometimes the most atmosphere-shifting prayer is whispered through tears. Sometimes it's all you can do to breathe the words, God, I can't, but you can. That's not weakness. That's power, because that prayer surrenders control. And when control is surrendered, the Spirit can move freely. In those moments, heaven leans in. The presence of God begins to settle in the room. It's not loud, but it's unmistakable. Everything begins to change, not always immediately in your circumstances, but certainly in your perspective. Your heart begins to soften. Your thoughts begin to clear, and slowly the atmosphere around you becomes fertile ground for hope, healing, revelation, and breakthrough. This is the hidden power in a single prayer. It's not just communication, it's transformation. When Jesus said, "Ask and it will be given, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened," he wasn't setting up a formula. He was inviting us into a relationship where our smallest cry can move the greatest power in the universe. That's what's available when you pray from the heart. Have you ever felt the weight of hopelessness lift after a desperate cry to God? That wasn't coincidence. That was the atmosphere shifting. Have you ever stepped into a moment of surrender and suddenly felt joy where there was sorrow? Peace where there was panic? That's not just emotion. That's the Spirit moving in response to the sound of surrender. Because that's what true prayer is, surrender. It's not just a list of needs. It's a relinquishing of control, a positioning of the heart to say, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. And when that level of trust is activated, heaven responds. Peace floods in, confusion loses its grip, and the spiritual temperature begins to rise. One prayer is all it takes, not a performance, not a script, just one pure moment of connection between your heart and the heart of God. In that moment, strongholds can break, healing can begin, direction can be revealed, the room can feel different, you can feel different. Don't underestimate the power of that one prayer. It may seem small, but it's backed by the full weight of heaven. It's like a key that unlocks a door you didn't even realize was closed. One prayer of surrender, one prayer of faith, one prayer of genuine hunger, it changes everything. If you've been carrying heaviness, confusion, or spiritual fog, maybe it's not more that you need. Maybe it's just one prayer, a real one, a raw one, a surrendered one, the kind that moves heaven and reshapes earth around you, because that's the power of a single atmosphere-shifting prayer. Most people underestimate the power of atmosphere. We think the outcomes in our lives are shaped solely by effort, talent, or opportunity. But what if one of the most overlooked influences on our life's direction is the spiritual atmosphere we live in every day? What if the environment around your spirit, what you carry in your thoughts, emotions, and energy, is doing more to shape your future than anything else? Atmosphere is invisible, but it's not undetectable. You can feel it. Step into a room filled with tension and it presses against your chest. Enter a space where peace reigns and your soul immediately exhales. That same principle applies spiritually. The atmosphere you live in, dwell in, speak from, pray in, That atmosphere is constantly shaping your beliefs, your decisions, and ultimately your outcomes. In fact, it's often not your circumstances that limit you. It's the spiritual atmosphere you've allowed to settle over your life. There are atmospheres that restrict and atmospheres that release. A restrictive atmosphere feels like heaviness, confusion, fear, or doubt. It shuts down faith. It closes your ears to the voice of God. It magnifies problems and minimizes hope. It convinces you that what you see is all there is, and slowly that atmosphere begins to shape your expectations, your speech, your prayers, and your decisions follow. But a releasing atmosphere, one filled with faith, hope, peace, and trust, creates the space for divine possibilities. It opens your heart to receive. It restores your clarity. It softens your emotions so that healing can begin. And when your atmosphere is in alignment with heaven, your outcomes start to reflect heaven's promises. You begin to think with the mind of Christ, act with boldness, speak with authority, and move with clarity. Why? Because the air around your spirit isn't fighting against your purpose, it's flowing with it. We don't realize how often we settle for toxic atmospheres, not just in our physical environments, but internally. We live with the noise of fear. We rehearse doubt. We let worry shape our expectations. We pray from a place of panic instead of peace. And in doing so, we are planting seeds in the wrong climate. And you cannot grow heavenly fruit in a hellish atmosphere. That's why changing your spiritual atmosphere is not optional. It's essential, because the outcome of your life will reflect the dominant atmosphere of your spirit. If you dwell in anxiety, you'll make decisions rooted in self-protection. If you stay in bitterness, your relationships will be poisoned. If you live under shame, your confidence will shrink. But if you shift into an atmosphere of grace, truth, and God's presence, everything starts to rise. You begin to walk differently, talk differently, believe differently, think of a greenhouse. The same seed planted in the wrong atmosphere can wither and die, but placed in the right environment, with warmth, light, and nourishment, it thrives. The seed didn't change, the potential didn't change, the atmosphere did. And it's the same with your soul. You don't need to become someone else. You need to change the environment your spirit is rooted in. Sometimes, the greatest act of spiritual warfare is to guard and shift your atmosphere. It means becoming deeply aware of what you're carrying, what you're allowing in, and what you're agreeing with. Every thought is an invitation. Every emotion is a messenger, and every moment you are either partnering with heaven or partnering with fear. The atmosphere you cultivate is either opening the door to break through or keeping it shut tight. Outcomes flow from alignment. When your inner atmosphere is aligned with the Spirit of God, when peace rules, when truth leads, when worship is louder than worry, then your decisions, your direction, and your destiny begin to take form under that influence. That doesn't mean storms won't come. It means you'll carry the atmosphere of peace through the storm, and that changes how you respond, how you wait, and how you speak. A surrendered atmosphere produces surrendered outcomes. It makes room for God to do what you cannot. It doesn't mean life gets easy. It means your spirit gets strong. And when your atmosphere shifts, you'll be amazed at how much begins to change. People notice. Environments respond. Opportunities open. Healing begins. Even your own thoughts begin to cooperate with God's will. All because the atmosphere you carry has changed from confusion to clarity, from heaviness to lightness, from striving to surrender. You don't have to live under a cloud. You don't have to carry yesterday's atmosphere into today's promise. Every day, you get to choose the climate your soul will live in. You get to create the environment that surrounds your spirit. And the best news, it doesn't start outside of you. It starts within. Atmosphere affects outcome. What you dwell in becomes what you walk out. So guard your atmosphere. Feed it with worship. Clear it with prayer. Protect it with truth. And when you feel it shift, when peace comes in, when fear breaks off, when joy returns, watch how quickly the rest of your life begins to follow. There is a moment in the life of every believer when the spiritual becomes more than theory. It becomes experience. It becomes breath, weight, atmosphere, movement. And in that moment, you realize that heaven is not far away. It's not some distant realm locked behind clouds and mystery. Heaven is close. It is ready. And the invitation has always been the same. Let it invade. When we talk about heaven invading earth, we're not speaking in poetic language or vague metaphor. We are speaking of divine reality breaking into human limitation. We are speaking of the supernatural presence of God entering the natural circumstances of our lives. And this is not reserved for the few. It's not only for the spiritually elite or the perfectly positioned. It is for every heart that dares to believe that prayer is more than words. It's a portal. One real prayer, a prayer spoken in faith and surrender, can open the atmosphere and welcome heaven's rule into earthly chaos. When Jesus taught us to pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven," he was not giving us a nice idea. He was giving us authority. He was showing us what to ask for, what to expect, and what to carry. He wasn't telling us to escape earth. He was teaching us to host heaven here. That means your life, your family, your workplace, your church, your mind. Every space you touch has the potential to be a landing place for the reality of heaven. Where there is pain, peace can descend. Where there is confusion, wisdom can come. Where there is darkness, light can pour in. Heaven doesn't wait for you to be perfect. It waits for you to make room. Prayer is the language of that invitation. When you speak in alignment with the heart of God, you create a pathway for the unseen to affect the seen. You begin to release something more powerful than effort. You release divine presence. You shift the air around you. You clear the spiritual fog and allow clarity to settle in. Because when heaven invades earth, the atmosphere changes first. Then the circumstances follow. So many people pray only to inform God of their problems, but heaven, inviting prayer, does something different. It aligns, it agrees, it releases, it surrenders the outcome and calls for divine intervention. This kind of prayer is less about control and more about communion. It's the prayer that says, "God, have your way here. Let what is true in heaven become true in me, in this situation, in this atmosphere." It's the moment where you stop begging and start believing. When heaven invades, the impossible becomes possible. Miracles don't feel far off anymore. Healing becomes natural. Hope is not a stretch, it's the air you breathe. You no longer react from fear, because fear cannot survive in a heaven-soaked atmosphere. You start to think with clarity, speak with purpose, and see beyond your circumstances. The lens shifts, the weight lifts, the room feels different because it is different, not by chance, but by invitation. Sometimes heaven invades quietly, like peace that settles in the middle of heartbreak. Other times it comes like a flood, shaking everything that's out of alignment until only truth remains. But in every case, heaven's presence is not just emotional, it's transformational. You leave different. You feel lighter, stronger, more anchored. That's not a feeling. That's divine reality becoming yours. But this invasion isn't random. It's connected to hunger. It's drawn by surrender. God does not force his presence where it isn't welcomed. He responds to the cry of the hungry heart, the one that says, I need more than what I see. I want more than what I can do. I need heaven here now. That cry shakes the unseen world. That cry is holy. That cry creates an opening. And once heaven starts to invade, it doesn't stop with you. The atmosphere you carry becomes the atmosphere you release. People around you start to sense something different. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because your inner climate is now hosting something higher. You begin to change rooms without saying a word. You begin to influence hearts by simply being aligned. You begin to carry what you've invited, and that's when the supernatural becomes natural. It's not about hype. It's not about noise. It's about presence. Heaven invading earth doesn't mean a constant emotional high. It means a consistent, tangible awareness of God's nearness and authority in your everyday life. It means you no longer walk through fire alone. You no longer face decisions in confusion. You don't wrestle through chaos without covering, because heaven is not an idea anymore, it's your atmosphere. So ask boldly, pray with confidence. Don't just seek relief, invite rain. Don't just look for escape, create encounter. Heaven is not locked up. It is near and it is waiting for your voice. Your prayer is the invitation. Your surrender is the landing pad, and your faith is the spark. Let heaven invade. Let it fill your home. Let it transform your mind. Let it cover your pain. Let it clear the air around you. Because when it comes, everything changes, not because the world changed, but because the atmosphere did. Surrender, it's a word that many shy away from. In a world that values control, strategy, and independence, surrender sounds like weakness. But in the kingdom of God, surrender is not defeat. It is the key to power. It is not giving up. It is giving over. It is the one posture that unlocks everything heaven wants to release into your life. If you want to see a shift in your spiritual atmosphere, if you want to see the supernatural invade your ordinary, it will not come through striving. It will come through surrender. There is something about surrender that attracts the Spirit of God. Not because God enjoys watching you relinquish control, but because he knows that until you do, you'll always be living beneath what he's trying to give. Surrender is the gate between what you can do and what God wants to do. As long as you're still clinging, managing, planning every detail, and refusing to yield, you are depending on your own strength, and your atmosphere will reflect that. It will be tight, anxious, and full of pressure. But the moment you say, God, I don't want my way anymore. I want yours. Everything begins to change. Your heart softens. Your ears open. The weight lifts, and heaven begins to move in. Why? Because God doesn't move where he's not welcomed. He waits to be invited, and surrender is the deepest kind of invitation. It's saying, you're not just allowed in. I give you full access. I trust you more than I trust myself. That's the language of surrender. And when that language rises from your spirit, it resonates in heaven. It shifts things. It prepares the ground. Some people pray but never surrender. They speak words toward God while still holding tightly to their own expectations, their own timelines, their own preferences. They ask for answers, but they aren't truly willing to let go of their version of the solution. That kind of prayer does not carry the same weight. It is diluted, because surrender isn't just about saying yes to God. It's about saying no to your need to control. It's a breaking, a yielding, and while it may feel costly, it's always followed by peace. There's a kind of stillness that only surrender can bring. The noise in your head quiets, the weight in your chest lightens. The urgency to prove or perform fades. Why? Because you've laid it down. You're no longer trying to carry what was never yours to carry. You've given it back to the one who actually holds the outcome. And in that moment, the atmosphere around you changes, because the atmosphere within you has changed. You see, surrender isn't passive, it's wildly active. It is a daily, deliberate decision to hand over the reins. It's spiritual warfare in its purest form, not because you're fighting people or situations, but because you're resisting the impulse to take control. Every time you say, God, have your way, you're breaking agreement with fear, pride, and anxiety. You're aligning with truth, and in that alignment, heaven begins to flow. This is where miracles happen, not when we perform perfectly, but when we yield completely. There is no greater place of clarity than the place of surrender. Confusion starts to dissolve. Decisions become clearer. You begin to sense direction where there was only fog. Why? Because surrender clears the clutter. It makes room. It says, I don't have to know everything. I just have to trust the one who does. And that trust begins to create an atmosphere that heaven can inhabit. Surrender also restores intimacy. So often we wonder why God feels distant, when in reality we've been the ones holding him at arm's length. We've invited him in, but only to the guest room, only to the places we've already cleaned up. Surrender throws open every door and says, have all of me. And it's in that place that God no longer feels like a concept, but a presence. That's when your spirit becomes deeply aware. He's here, and when he is there really, there everything changes. Your perspective shifts. Your heart beats slower. You stop bracing for impact and start leaning into peace. Even if the storm doesn't stop, you stop being ruled by it. Even if the waiting continues, the desperation leaves. Why? Because surrender has brought you into alignment with the King of Peace. You've made room for his rule, and his rule is never anxious, never chaotic, never rushed. So many are trying to wrestle their way into breakthrough, trying to force clarity or demand answers. But the deepest shifts don't happen through striving, they happen through surrender. One honest, wholehearted, gut-level moment of surrender can do more to transform your atmosphere than 1,000 hours of trying to fix things yourself. This is the paradox of the kingdom. The less you hold on, the more you gain. The more you yield, the more authority you carry. The lower you go in surrender, the higher you rise in peace. That's not just spiritual theory. It's a spiritual law. And if you're desperate to see your atmosphere change, to feel the weight lift and the clarity return, ask yourself, have I surrendered? Not halfway, not with conditions, full surrender. That's where everything begins. That's where the Spirit breathes. That's where heaven invades. And that's where you stop surviving and start living in the fullness of what God intended all along. There is a kind of prayer that goes beyond routine. It's not rehearsed. It's not polite. It doesn't follow a formula. It's raw, simple, yet astonishingly powerful. It's the kind of prayer that opens something in the spirit realm and doesn't just request a response. It creates a connection. It creates a conduit, a living channel between heaven and earth, and it doesn't require theological training or perfect words. It requires only one thing, authenticity wrapped in surrender. This one prayer changes the atmosphere. That isn't hype, it's truth. Because this prayer isn't about asking for things. It's not a list of needs or a set of memorized phrases. It's a prayer that says something deeper than, God, help me. It says, God, have me. That single shift in language changes everything. It turns prayer into a portal. It opens up a passageway between where you are and where God reigns, and in that space things begin to move. When a person prays from that place, from that level of yieldedness, they don't just speak to God, they partner with Him. They don't just hand God their situation, they hand Him their will, and that is the turning point. That is the prayer that reaches through the veil and makes room for glory. It's not about being loud or emotional. It's about being real. It's about being available. It's about saying, not my will, but yours be done, and meaning it with your whole soul. That's what creates the conduit. That's what draws heaven into your now. It's not eloquence. It's not perfection. It's posture. This one prayer becomes a bridge, one end rooted in the heart of heaven, the other planted in your present moment, and through that bridge flows the very breath of God. Not just answers, not just blessings, but presence, peace, power, direction, wisdom, strength. It's not always immediate, but it's always real. The current begins to flow, and everything within the radius of your life begins to respond. People around you may not even know what's changed, but they'll sense it. The atmosphere will feel different. You will feel different, because now you're not just hoping for divine intervention. You're living in divine alignment. You're not trying to pull heaven down by force. You've opened the valve. You've become the open door, and heaven never ignores an open door. So many prayers are spoken in desperation, and there's nothing wrong with that. God hears every cry, but this prayer, the one that creates the conduit, is deeper than desperation. It is born from a place that says, God, I want what you want more than I want relief, more than I want control, more than I want answers. That prayer doesn't just move the heart of God. It makes space for Him to move through you. And here's the mystery. Once that connection is open, it doesn't close. It becomes part of you. You become a carrier of that open conduit. Your words carry more weight. Your presence carries more peace. Your life becomes more than your own, because you're not operating out of your own reservoir anymore. You're drawing from the endless well of His Spirit. And what started as a moment of prayer becomes a lifestyle of hosting. This is not about having spiritual goosebumps. It's about function. Conduits are designed to carry. They're not flashy, but they're vital. And when you become a spiritual conduit, you begin to carry the essence of heaven into whatever space you enter, a hospital room, a tense meeting, a weary heart, a hurting family. You don't just bring comfort, you bring connection. You bring access. You bring the presence of God because you've stayed connected to Him in the secret place. And it all begins with this one prayer, the prayer that says, God, I give you the space. I give you my yes. I give you the right to interrupt my plans. I give you the authority to lead. That is not a one-time event. It is a daily invitation, a daily opening, and every time you speak it, even in silence, you feel the shift. You feel the weight exchange. You feel the river flow. This is how lives are transformed, not just by attending church or knowing scripture. Those are important. But real transformation happens when a person becomes a resting place for the presence of God. That's what this prayer makes you. A resting place, a conduit, a vessel through which heaven flows naturally, powerfully, and consistently. And the beauty of it, you don't have to force anything. You simply stay open, stay yielded, keep the conduit clear. When fear tries to clog it, return to surrender. When anxiety clouds your mind, return to the prayer. When you feel dry, return to the source, because the flow never stops. Only we do, but every time we come back to this one prayer, the prayer of true surrender, we realign. We reconnect, we reawaken. You may never see lightning flash when you pray it. You may not feel anything spectacular in the moment, but something is happening in the quiet, in the spirit, in the unseen realm. The air shifts, the veil thins, the current begins to move, and heaven comes closer. So pray it again and again until it's not a moment, it's a lifestyle, until heaven flowing through your life feels as natural as breathing, until the atmosphere around you carries the unmistakable fragrance of His presence. All because you dared to pray the prayer that changed everything. There is a shift that takes place when you stop merely hoping God might move and begin expecting Him to. That shift, subtle but profound, alters your spiritual atmosphere entirely. When you start living in expectancy, you no longer approach God with hesitation. You approach Him with boldness, with a heart that leans forward, wide open, ready to receive. You don't just whisper prayers. You plant them, and like a farmer sowing seed, you fully expect a harvest. Expectancy is not arrogance. It is not entitlement. It is the natural response of a heart that truly believes in the goodness of God. It's the mindset of a person who knows that when heaven is involved, something is always possible. Something is always about to happen. It's not about stirring emotion. It's about building posture. Living in expectancy means waking up every day with a quiet, steady conviction. God is with me, God is moving, and I am not forgotten. When you live in that kind of atmosphere, fear loses its grip. Doubt starts to feel unnatural. Hopelessness cannot settle in. Why? Because expectancy fills the air like oxygen. It becomes your breath, your lens, your language. It causes you to pray differently. You stop praying as if you're trying to convince God to show up. You begin praying as if He's already present. And He is. You stop wondering if He'll move and start asking how and when. Your inner world becomes aligned with His nature, and that changes how you interpret everything happening around you. Expectancy is what faith sounds like when it matures. It doesn't shout to prove something. It rests in assurance. It walks through valleys with an eye on the mountaintop. It doesn't pretend trouble doesn't exist. It just knows the outcome doesn't depend on the trouble. It depends on the one who rules over it, and so, even in the midst of silence, delay, or opposition, expectancy says He's still working. That kind of living can't be faked. It must be cultivated. And it grows in the secret place, where no one sees, where your heart learns to recognize His whisper more than the noise. It's in those quiet, surrendered spaces that God starts to anchor your soul with real expectancy. Not the kind that wavers with emotions, but the kind that holds you steady like a spiritual gravity. You stop reaching in the dark and start walking in confidence, not because the path is clear, but because the one leading you is. There's a reason Jesus said, according to your faith, let it be done to you. Faith is the soil, but expectancy is the atmosphere. You can have all the right beliefs, but if your atmosphere is heavy with doubt, fear, or weariness, it's hard for the seed to grow. But when you wake up and say, I expect you to move today, God, that atmosphere becomes fertile. Heaven can breathe in it. Miracles can manifest in it, not because you earned them, but because you believed they were possible. Expectancy doesn't mean everything happens overnight. It doesn't guarantee a smooth road, but it does mean you're never walking it alone. It means your eyes are fixed above the storm. It means you make room for the supernatural, even when the natural looks impossible. You see a closed door and say, God must be about to open another one. You hear bad news and still expect his peace to flood in. You face delay, but remain convinced that the story isn't over. That is the strength of a life lived in holy expectancy. And it's contagious. When you live in that kind of spiritual climate, others notice. They begin to wonder why you're not shaken, why you're not cynical, why you seem to carry peace that doesn't match your circumstances. And it's not that you've figured everything out. It's that you've built your life around the expectation that God is who he says he is. You've dared to believe consistently and unapologetically that heaven is near and active and full of promise. This is what it looks like to walk in step with the Spirit, not just reacting to what happens around you, but anticipating what God is doing in it. You wait differently, you pray differently, you dream differently, because you expect him to show up. You expect him to restore, to redeem, to guide, to heal. And even if the answer comes differently than you imagined, your expectancy keeps your heart open long enough to recognize it when it arrives. This one prayer we've talked about, this atmosphere, shifting prayer is never meant to be a single moment. It's meant to create a life posture, and that posture is sustained by expectancy, a steady, burning anticipation that God is always at work, that nothing is wasted, that your obedience, your surrender, your intercession, your trust, they are not in vain. They are laying track for the train of God's glory to move through your life. So don't settle into survival mode. Don't let unanswered prayers make you numb. Don't let delay make you passive. Stir your spirit again. Speak to your soul. Say, I will wait, but I will wait expectantly. Let that expectancy rise like incense. Let it shift the air around you, because the moment you begin to live with true expectancy, you're no longer just enduring. You're preparing. You're making room for a move of God that doesn't just visit, it dwells. He is nearer than you think, and your expectancy is the welcome mat. When your atmosphere has been shifted by a true encounter with God, when your inner world is no longer ruled by chaos, fear, or striving, it changes how you walk, not just how you worship, not just how you pray in moments of desperation. It changes how you live every day, every moment. This isn't about a spiritual high or a once in a lifetime experience. It's about stepping into a new rhythm, a new awareness, a new kind of existence that refuses to return to old patterns. Walking daily in a shifted atmosphere means carrying the awareness of God's presence like it's oxygen, constantly inhaled, deeply trusted. It's not that the world gets easier. The storms still come, the deadlines, the disappointments, the unexpected phone calls. They don't go away, but you are different. You respond from a different place now. You're no longer reacting out of panic. You're responding out of peace, because the atmosphere around you is anchored by the one who lives within you. So many chase breakthrough and miss the purpose of it. Breakthrough isn't the end goal. It's the beginning of a new way of being. It's heaven saying, now that you've seen me move, live like I'm with you all the time, because I am. That is the invitation to stop compartmentalizing God to church services and emergencies and start living as if every breath, every step, every decision is made with him right beside you, because the truth is, he is. And when you live like that, The shifted atmosphere becomes your default, not your exception. The danger is always in forgetting. It's in letting the sacred moments slip into the category of emotional memories rather than spiritual landmarks. But if you intentionally nurture what God starts in you, through prayer, through surrender, through stillness, you begin to build consistency. You begin to carry what once only visited you, and that consistency becomes your strength. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It's steady, and in this world, steady is a miracle. Living in this shifted atmosphere doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you're present. It means you're more aware of him than you are of your fear. You're more sensitive to his whisper than the noise of the world, and that awareness doesn't make you weird. It makes you powerful in the quietest, most authentic way. You can walk into a room and shift it, not by your charisma, but by your calm. Not by your knowledge, but by your peace. People won't always be able to explain what it is about you, but they'll know it feels different when you're there. That's the mark of someone who walks with God. To walk daily in this shifted atmosphere is to live in a place of ongoing surrender. Not the emotional surrender that fades after a passionate moment, but the kind that becomes your posture. The kind that says, God, lead me again today, speak again, use me again. I don't want yesterday's manna. I want fresh bread from you today. That kind of hunger keeps the atmosphere alive. It keeps the spiritual air around you clear and breathable for you and for others who are desperate to breathe something real. This life is not lived on autopilot. You can't coast in the spirit, but you can walk. And walking means progress, pace, intention. It means choosing over and over to turn your heart toward him when distraction and discouragement try to pull you away. It means listening before speaking, pausing before reacting, praying before assuming. These are small decisions, but they create massive impact. Because in those moments, you are reinforcing the atmosphere of heaven on earth, in your home, in your relationships, in your thoughts. There will be days when you don't feel the atmosphere. There will be days when your flesh tries to scream louder than your spirit. But don't be deceived. Just because you can't feel the fire doesn't mean it's not burning. Just because you don't see the fruit today doesn't mean the seed is dead. Keep walking. Keep choosing him, because walking daily in a shifted atmosphere is not about chasing a feeling. It's about living in faith. You begin to see God in the smallest things. A conversation becomes sacred. A quiet moment becomes an altar. You wake up and thank him before your feet hit the floor. Not out of duty, but because your spirit is alive. You don't pray just to fix something. You pray because you love the sound of his presence. That's when you know the shift has truly settled in. When your life is no longer split between spiritual and natural, but fully intertwined. This is what you were created for. Not just to survive on occasional encounters, but to dwell in the atmosphere of his presence daily. To live like heaven is near, because it is. To speak with the assurance that God is listening. Because he is. To walk with the kind of expectancy that shakes the dust off your soul and awakens hope again. Because he's not done. He's just beginning, so walk, not rushed, not burdened. Walk steady. Walk bold, walk yielded, because the atmosphere you carry isn't just for you. It's an invitation for others. You are now the vessel through which peace flows, through which faith rises, through which God moves. Not in just one powerful moment, but every single day. If you want to change your life, start by changing the air around your spirit. And if you want to change your atmosphere, pray the prayer that breaks the chains. Not my will, but yours be done. Say it with fire. Say it with faith. Say it until your atmosphere aligns with heaven.